we discussed how consumer protection is important from the point of view of business as well as consumers. Now in this video, let us go through the legal protection provided to the consumers by the Indian government. That is, let us consider the several regulations that have been designed by the Indian government to provide adequate protection to the consumers. So let's discuss these legal acts one by one. Well, most importantly, the first act provided by the government is the Consumer Protection Act 1986. Well, this act basically provides a three-tier machinery comprising of District Forum, State Commission, and the National Commission for Redressal of the Consumer Grievances. That is, under this act, a consumer can file a complaint with the District Forum, State Commission, or the National Commission and find proper redressal for their grievances. Moreover, the Consumer Protection Act also protects the interests of the consumers against various forms of exploitation such as defective goods, deficient services, and unfair trade practices, etc. Now let's move on to the next act, which is the Contracts Act, which was laid down in 1872. Well, this act defines the conditions under which promises in a contract are legally binding for both the buyer and the seller. That is, in case the buyer and seller come under a contract, then it is this act which protects the interests of both the buyers and the seller. Moreover, the act also specifies the remedies or the solutions that are available to both the parties, that is, the buyer and the seller, in case any one of the two breaches the contract. With this, let's move on to the next act, which is the Sales of Goods Act, which was enacted in 1930. Well, this act provides protection and relief to the consumers in case the goods purchased by them do not abide by the expressed or implied conditions and warranties as stated by the seller. For example, if a consumer buys a product wherein the seller promises a 1-year warranty, and let's say later on the seller denies such a warranty, then the consumer can file a complaint and find probable solution under Sales of Goods Act 1930. Now let's move on to the next act, which is Agricultural Produce Grading and Marketing Act 1937. Well, this act provides proper grading standards for quality of the products and procedures for packing and marking agricultural commodities and livestock commodities. Moreover, it is under this act that a quality certification mark is provided, which is called egg mark. In other words, the act provides proper quality standards for the goods and provides egg mark when it is assured of the quality of the product. Here, egg mark is an acronym for agricultural marketing. With this, let's move on to the next act, which is Prevention of Food Adulteration Act 1954. Well, as the name of the act itself implies, this act provides provisions for the prevention of adulteration of food. In other words, it protects the interests of the consumers by preventing any kind of adulteration in the food products. Now let's discuss about some more legal protections provided to the consumers by the government. Now moving forward, let us go through another act enacted by the government in 1976, which is the Standard of Weights and Measures Act. Well, this act safeguards the interests of the consumers against exploitative practices related to underweight and undermeasure of goods purchased by them. For example, if a consumer buys a product whose weight has been mentioned as 150 grams, however, the actual grammage of that product is merely 75 grams. Then, in such a case, the consumer can find relief under Standards of Weights and Measures Act 1976. Now let's move on to the next act, which is Essential Commodities Act 1955. Well, the act provides a provision for control in production, supply, and distribution of essential goods such as drugs, food items, fuel items, etc. Moreover, there is also provision for controlling the unnecessary inflationary trends, and the Act also ensures equal distribution of goods among the consumers. And finally, it controls anti-social activities such as hoarding and black marketing. So we can say that the Act provides protection from any unnecessary price increase, and also protects the consumers against exploitative practices like hoarding and black marketing. Now let's move to the next act, which is Trademarks Act 1999. Well, this act checks the use of fraudulent marks for certifying quality on various goods. In other words, if a consumer buys a product with a fake quality mark which certifies the quality of the good, then the consumer can find probable relief under Trademark Act 1999. Now let's move on to the next act, which is Bureau of Indian Standards Act 1986. Well, under this act, the Bureau of Indian Standards has been set up, and this bureau formulates standards for the quality of goods and provides certification of quality through BIS certification scheme. And under this scheme, the bureau provides a quality certification mark, that is ISI mark. Now, along with this, the bureau also provides a grievance cell to redress complaints regarding the quality of products. In other words, if a consumer faces any quality issues regarding the products which contains this ISI mark, then they can file a complaint with the Bureau of Indian Standards Act to find probable relief. With this, let's move to the last act, which is the Competition Act 2002. Well, the Competition Act prevents the practices by the business firms that may hinder competition in the market, such as mergers, monopolies, etc. In other words, we can say that the Competition Act, by preventing mergers of big companies, allow more competition and thus protects the interest of the consumers.